Thank you very much for meeting.
You're welcome.
So my first question is, where were you working or living during the 2008 financial crisis?
So I was working at Deutsche Bank.
Deutsche Bank, okay.
And my responsibility was covering the real estate stocks. And that included covering the housing stocks. And the housing stocks were housing in the U.S. was the crux of the problem that caused the financial, collapse. Okay. So that's how I was close to it. And so I was living in Darien, Connecticut.
Okay, interesting. So what was your initial reaction when the crisis started to unfold?
Well, the crisis really, you could see it coming, you could see it coming in 2007.
Okay.
Right? So I had written a report where I analyzed the cost of renting a house, renting an apartment versus the cost of buying a home.
Mm-hmm.
And that relationship was pretty stable for 20 years. And then it got very out of whack. And that the cost of owning a home was roughly twice the cost of renting an apartment.
Okay.
And usually that relationship is maybe a 20% premium. Instead it was a 200% premium. And so I was writing reports saying the housing market's in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And the housing prices are likely to come down. And so I was writing about it and a few other people for about 18 months. And then the first domino to fall was Bear Stearns.
Okay.
In March of 2008. And Bear Stearns collapsed. And Bear Stearns was kind of a mid-tier investment bank. So it was important, but it was not systematically important. So important that if it failed, everyone else would fail. And then as the prices for homes started to come down in the beginning, by the middle of 2008, the Fed was starting to get worried, and then people started worried about Lehman Brothers. And that was in September of 2008.
Okay.
And so I remember being at a dinner, I don't know, maybe about 2 or 3 days before Lehman collapsed. And everybody was really, really nervous.
Okay.
And everybody felt that something bad was going to happen soon, and it was likely to be Lehman Brothers. And the concern was would the Federal Reserve let Lehman collapse?
Okay, this should work. All right, so kind of more about the public's reaction. When did the public start to panic? I know you said they started realizing all the banks were crashing. So more about their reaction.
So the public, only 1/3 of the public reads newspapers.
Okay.
So the public, like your mom, she had no idea what was going on. And so the public really wasn't paying attention to it, and really did not understand how significant the problem was.
Okay.
So, when the stock market started to drop, let's see, let's get a stock market chart here. You could make all this stuff up.
Okay.
And nobody checked. And they'd give you the money.
Okay.
And then you go buy the house. And so you could lie about it. You can't lie about it now. So that's the big thing. You can't lie about it now.
Okay.
That's how crazy it was back then. So yeah, it could happen, but the odds of it happening are lower.
Got it. Okay. All right. I think if you maybe could just talk about kind of your job during, what you did during the financial crisis.
Okay, so my job was to cover the real estate stocks. That included, REITs and home builders. So I was very close to the housing market.
Okay.
And so I had done an analysis of
looking at the cost to rent an apartment versus the cost of buying a home. And that
Okay.
relationship had been very stable for 30 years. And then in 2005, 6, and 7, it got significantly more expensive to own a home. But people were doing it anyway. And so my conclusion was that the housing market was very overpriced and the prices were likely to go down. So that was my, and then my job was to tell investors that, the housing market was in trouble and could go down.
Okay, and like how did they tend to react? Were they like super stressed? Like obviously I assume they would be.
Well, I mean, they were like, thank you very much. But, nobody else was saying that. And like the chief economist from Deutsche Bank had come into my office and he said, here's a chart of housing prices. They've never gone down. And I said, well, they're about to go down. This is no way can this relationship be sustainable. So we were telling people this for about 18 months before they realized, housing prices are going to go down. And they started to go down. And that was in the first part of '08.
Okay. And then do you want to touch upon again kind of the end of the crisis and like what happened, how it was solved?
So it was really resolved by the work of Ben Bernanke, who was the Federal Reserve Chairman, Hank Paulson, the Treasury Secretary, and then the political leaders, George Bush and Nancy Pelosi. They came up with ways to allow the banks not to fail and allow them to survive. And in doing so, that enabled asset prices, which is what supports pension plans and retirement plans, 401ks, and everything, and housing prices to stabilize. And so that people would keep the economy going and keep spending money. So that took about 6 months to really kind of take root, and for the consumers to feel that things weren't going to get any worse. They may not get better, but they weren't going to get any worse.
Right. Okay. And then another thing was I asked about kind of nowadays if this could ever happen again, and you said yes. And like what was in place? You want to talk about that again?
Yeah. So could it happen again? Yes. Is it likely to happen? No, because the rules about getting a mortgage have gotten significantly tighter or stricter than they were in 2006 and 2007.
Okay.
Two, as a result of this, the Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department have made much stricter requirements for the banks and how much capital they need to support their lending. So the banks are much, 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 much more healthy. And then thirdly, just the disclosure requirements by the banks and the insurance companies of what their holdings are. That allows the regulators, like the Fed, to be able to identify trouble spots much, much earlier than they could before. So could it happen again? Yeah. The likelihood of it happening is definitely much, much less.
Right, perfect. And then kind of just like personally, how would you say the financial crisis affected you?
Well, the first thing it made all of us very, very concerned about our jobs, because we were all afraid that our employers were going to go out of business and we were all going to, be sent home without jobs. I mean, when Bear Stearns failed, when Lehman Brothers failed, those people not only lost their jobs, they lost a lot of their net worth, which was in the stocks of the companies. And so everybody was worried about that. So I ended up getting a much better job offer in early '09 to reduce my personal concern. And I went to a company that had just made billions of dollars doing what I was worried about, which was they made money on the collapse of the housing market. And so I went to a company much more stable, much better capitalized, and a much greater opportunity.
Got it. All right, perfect. So that's about 5 minutes, which is all I should need. So thank you so much